So as I'm updating my projections and rankings throughout the offseason, one of the things that I like to do is see where I have players ranked in comparison to other experts in the industry. And one of the easiest ways I have found to do that is by going to FantasyPros expert consensus rankings, where they compile a list of 60 experts rankings and they create a consensus rankings list out of them. And when I was looking at that list, there were 5 running backs that I found I differ in opinion on fairly greatly in comparison to these experts. And as much respect as I have for them, I'm going to tell you why they're wrong. I was originally drafting Rhamondre Stevenson a decent amount to start the offseason, but then I finished my projections for the Patriots, and I will be drafting almost 0 of him moving forward. He is currently my running back 30 compared to ECR's running back 19. And it really wasn't great for Rhamondre last season. He had a nice little stretch, but he was the running back 27 in fantasy points per game. His 17-game pace was 72 targets after seeing 88 the year prior. His yards per carry dipped, the yards per route run in the receiving game dipped for the second straight year. This is not a guy who is trending upward, and it's really tough to get any lower than the Patriots were last year. I get that, and theoretically, they should be taking a step forward with Drake May at quarterback this year, assuming he starts the year. Even if it's Jacoby Brissett, I think that's an upgrade from Mac Jones and Bailey Zappi. But the Patriots had to go out and throw cold water on Rhamondre Stevenson's value this offseason by bringing in Antonio Gibson, who thrives as a receiving back, just as Rhamondre Stevenson does. Because Rhamondre Stevenson, he isn't this thumper primarily around the goal line kind of back. Like, the most rush attempts he had in a season was 210 back in 2022, really only 2 years ago. And he's never had more than 5 rushing touchdowns in a season. Meanwhile, you look at Antonio Gibson's receiving metrics. He saw 59 targets last year, despite being behind Brian Robinson. Finished top 15 in receptions and top 10 in receiving yards at the running back position. So, unless Rhamondre becomes this early down goal line back and the Patriots are in scoring position often, which I don't think that's a guarantee just because they made an upgrade to Drake May at quarterback, who has a lot he needs to work on in terms of a prospect. I think long gone are the days we could rely on Rhamondre's PPR upside. And you're going to need that if you want to return on his current ADP of running back 20. In my last video of disastrously bad values in fantasy drafts right now, I talked about how I won't be drafting Nick Chubb this year because of his ACL injury last year. But I'm going to be making an exception for Jonathan Brooks in 2024 because he's currently ranked as my running back 24. Again, let's just name a few realities here, okay? Jonathan Brooks will be 21 entering this season, and these youngins tend to bounce back from ACLs much better than veterans do. And unlike Nick Chubb, Jonathan Brooks' ACL tear was clean. It was very similar to Breece Hall's that we saw in 2022. The Panthers also spent the 46th pick on Brooks. They spent mid-second round draft capital on him. He was the first running back taken despite the ACL injury. The Panthers clearly wanted him. And Jonathan Brooks is, let's just name the reality, he is a much better player than both Chuba Hubbard and Miles Sanders, who were both part of the previous Frank Reich regime. They were not part of this new Dave Canales regime. And now I'm not going to sit here and tell you that, Jonathan Brooks is absolutely going to crush year one, right? History shows that running backs year one post ACL typically produce 20% less than when they're at full strength. But Brooks is already talking about being ready for training camp. He may not actually miss a single game this year. And Dave Canales has already been talking him up, seeing him as a 3-down back. He loves the versatility. Jared Smola also mentions how Canales talked about getting him in space like he did with Rachaad White in the receiving game. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you Jonathan Brooks is Rachaad White this year, because that's just sloppy, lazy analysis. And I actually don't think that. That's what I actually thought. I'd have Jonathan Brooks as a top 10 running back. It's my running back 24. But all of this to say, ECR's ranking of running back 36 is almost double counting this injury that we already knew about coming into the season. And sure, you can punish him for being on a bad Panthers offense. But didn't we just see another young, talented running back in a bad offense with quote-unquote competition finish as the overall running back 2 last year? As a previous Javonte Williams stan, I know what kind of pain this statement is going to bring some of you, but I think we need to call it quits on Javonte. I'm really scared this 3-year build of anticipation is actually going to amount in a lot of disappointment. Javonte Williams, he actually had a nice little bounce back season in 2023. His efficiency was down just as we expected at 3.6 yards per carry, year one post ACL, but he was still given 217 attempts, 58 targets. He totaled just over 1,000 yards. That all led to only being the running back 29 overall and the running back 33 in fantasy points per game. Now, I know what you're thinking. You might be thinking, well, Lucas, the only way is up from here, right? You keep saying year one post ACL, there's going to be a dip in production, and it only gets better in year two. And while that's true, I'm going to say not so fast on that. I'm going to be the one to throw cold water on Javonte here. The Broncos depth chart in 2023 was Javonte Williams, Samaje Perine, and Jaleel McLaughlin, okay? That's not an exactly threatening running back room to take touches away from Javonte. So what did the Broncos do this offseason? They went out and drafted two younger assets to potentially compete for roles alongside of Javonte Williams. They drafted Audric Estime in the 5th round out of Notre Dame and undrafted free agent Blake Watson. Now, I'm not going to tell you that Javonte is going to lose his job to a 5th round pick or an undrafted free agent at that. But these guys can play roles that are going to siphon into Javonte Williams' touches, I'm afraid. You have Audric Estime, who is a big power back. He can take some of the early down work. You can see Blake Watson in more of a change of pace kind of role. And Sean Payton, he's actually been impressed with Jaleel McLaughlin this offseason. Take a listen here.
Jaleel stole first base, to use your phrase, last year, made the team, found a role for himself.
Yeah.
What does he have to do, given his size, obviously, to sort of make a bigger role?
I think his continued growth, you see him protecting the football. He's very disciplined as a change of pace route runner. I know he wants to continue to work on his role in the passing game. He'll come up and, wear me out asking for cut-ups and looking at certain routes. So it's, 1 to 2, but, again, he's here at 5:15, even in the off-season, first one here running in the weight room. And by the time he's at breakfast and most people are arriving, he's put in a good hour and a half's worth of work. So it's just the way he's wired. And it's impressive.
Now, look, I'm not too far off on my ranking. I have Javonte Williams as my running back 31 compared to ECR at running back 26. But I also think a lot of things have to break right for Javonte to finish as a borderline running back 2 this year, considering he wasn't even drafted to be a part of the Sean Payton regime. Apparently, it's really cool to like 2 guys this offseason, Dontavian Wicks and Zack Moss's backup, Chase Brown. Are we really excited for a guy who only saw 59 opportunities in his rookie season that we are discounting a starting running back in what's projected to be a great offense, all the way down to the running back 32 in ECR? It's obvious Brown has some juice, but let's not pretend this isn't the only play you remember from Chase Brown last season.
Browning dumps it off underneath. He's got Chase Brown. He's the speedster. He's got daylight inside the 30. One man to beat. Oh, he makes a move into the end zone.
Chase Brown, he'll obviously have an expanded role this season. There's no disputing that whatsoever. Zack Moss, he is not Joe Mixon. But that being said, when the Bengals cut bait with Joe Mixon, they wasted 0 time going out and signing Zack Moss. And Zack Moss, he showed he can handle it last year while he was filling in for Jonathan Taylor. He was 2nd in rushing yards. He was averaging 17.8 fantasy points per game, and he finished as a top 10 back in 4 of the first 6 weeks and really 4 of his first 5 games last year. You then look at Joe Mixon's role in Cincinnati. He finished as a top 10 running back in PPR formats in each of the last 3 years. Now, is Zack Moss the pass catching prowess that Joe Mixon was? No, absolutely not. But Joe Mixon was still 3rd in opportunity share and 3rd in red zone touches last year. There are 321 opportunities available now in Joe Mixon's absence. And while, yes, Chase Brown, he'll soak up a few of those rushing attempts. And yes, he'll come in more frequently on 3rd down work. Moss is going to be the primary back and the goal line thumper. He is currently inside my top 24 running backs. I talked about Josh Jacobs in my last video as a disastrously bad value right now, so I'll breeze through this and reiterate some of my most important points. Josh Jacobs' 2022 season was very clearly an outlier where he put up over 2,000 yards on 400 plus opportunities. The other things to note, he only has 1 fully healthy season played in his career. He has averaged 4 or less yards per carry in 3 of his 5 years in the league. He only has 2 finishes inside of the top 12 running backs. And I know that Green Bay is a much better situation than the Las Vegas Raiders are for Josh Jacobs. But we can't sit here and say it's always been sunshine and roses for Green Bay running backs. Only A.J. Dillon has scored more than 7, not even more. He scored 7 rushing touchdowns in a single season. He's the only running back to have even hit that number in the last 3 seasons. So my guess is that Josh Jacobs is probably going to hover right around that 7 to 8 mark. And yes, Josh Jacobs' receiving work was featured while he was in Vegas. And I think we can see that in Green Bay too. But man, I still keep thinking we're going to see Marshawn Lloyd a decent amount this year. Matt LaFleur has frequently deployed a 2 running back system. And I keep coming back to this presser with OC Adam Stenavich and what he actually has to say about Marshawn Lloyd.
He didn't have to play back in 19, right? It was Aaron Jones, Jamal, and AJ just had to play 1 game basically. Can you see that same thing with Lloyd, or do you kind of need to get him out there?
No, I would like to get him out there as much as possible. I think, he's got a skill set that's a little bit different than AJ's as far as his speed. He's not quite the bruiser that he is, obviously, but he's got a different type of skill set. So it'll be nice to get him the ball in space and just see what he can do. Because I think he's going to add a good explosive element to the offense for sure.
Aaron Jones only averaged 12.5 fantasy points per game over the last 3 years. And while Josh Jacobs might be in the better stage of his career than Aaron Jones is, ECR's rank of running back 12 is still too rich for me. I have Josh Jacobs as my running back 15. Alrighty, that is it. That is all I have. 5 running backs that the experts are all wrong about in 2024 fantasy football. If you want to see where I have all these running backs ranked, how I have them projected out for the 2024 season, fellasdraftguide.com. You can get your copy over there. We have projections on over 250 players statted out from all 3 of us fellas. So it's not just my projections. You get Cameron's projections and Tyler's projections. You can pay $10 there, or if you want to sign up for Underdog Fantasy using the code fellas, you can hit the QR code here. Underdog, they'll give you a free pick'em square. They will give you a bonus cash of up to $250 with your first deposit. And we'll give you our draft guide for absolutely free. So you can go to fellasdraftguide.com or click the QR code here, sign up for Underdog, with the code fellas. It will give you our draft guide for free upon your first deposit. We'll be back again this week. We got trending or ending players. We're going to be back next week with tiered rankings from our draft guide. So if you want to get a sneak peek, again, go check out that draft guide. If you're not subscribed, make sure you do that and turn on that notification bell as well so you don't miss a single piece of content we come out with for you all this offseason. We got so much more coming. Until we see you next time, though, stay safe, stay healthy. Deuces.